and welcome to this afternoon's session. I'm calling it the new Face of CiviCRM because I did a session last year at Drupal North about an intro to CiviCRM, so as not to totally repeat myself, and because the space I was allotted was in the front end track, we decided it would be best if I talk about the differences in the look of CiviCRM because they've been pretty significant since last year. I'm Catherine Carruthers. I have been making websites since the web was invented, and for about the last 10 or 11 years using Drupal mostly for labor organizations and nonprofits in the Ottawa area. I'm currently working for Action Canada for Sexual Health and Rights and a couple of other small nonprofits, mostly taking care of their Drupal sites and helping them use CiviCRM to the best advantage. And there's that again. So CiviCRM, very quickly, is an open source constituency relationship management system. So in easier to understand terms, it's kind of like Salesforce or things like that, but for nonprofits and charities. It's mostly used by charities. It's often a lot of political parties use it for their walk planning and get out the vote campaigns and fundraising because it has, it's on. Yeah, the main components are event planning, bulk email, understanding the relationships of people, and then in the last few years they've really beefed up the ability to use it to track fundraising and actually accept donations. There are, well, I'll get into that later. There are good hook-ins both to Drupal Commerce and a number of credit card payment processors. So if you're a small nonprofit and you're selling, like for the current place I'm working, we're selling a book as one of our things that we do, but we also solicit donations and stuff like that. So having a place to manage that all centrally instead of using MailChimp for your email and then Eventbrite for your event ticketing and then Drupal Commerce or some other Razor's Edge and whatever to manage donations and money flow. You can do that all in one open source free solution that just plugs into, I generally use it with Drupal, Drupal 7 up until now. It's just being, the Drupal 8 installation is working, but it's got some difficulties in installing it. So the community is still working on the Drupal 8 version. It also plugs into Backdrop, Joomla, or WordPress. So I've also used it on WordPress to do, and Joomla to do its own basic functions. But then with Drupal, as I'll get into later, there's a lot more you can do in Drupal with add-on modules. Right there. So the main one that draws people to, if they've already decided they're going to use CiviCRM and they don't know what environment they want to use it in, but they want to do anything that's gathering a lot of information, there's a module on Drupal.org called CiviCRM Web Form Integration. And what that does is it plugs CiviCRM fields into Drupal web forms. So say, for instance, you're running a Drupal camp and you want to tag all of the people already in your database who are signing up for a ticket. You also want to get their lunch choice. But lunch choice is not a piece of information that you ever need again. Right? You want that for your event today, but you don't need to be keeping that in your CRM database as a permanent piece of data for each user. So you can add Drupal web form fields that reference the CiviCRM for all the contact data, like all the more permanent data in your CiviCRM, and actually update the CiviCRM data with new email addresses and all of that as people are filling out the form. But it doesn't clog up your CRM forms with all of that extraneous stuff. The other Drupal modules that are really good are, or the ones that I use all the time, are ones that match up your Drupal roles for security with your CiviCRM groups and memberships, because one of the other modules in CiviCRM is managing memberships with timelines and price sets and all of that kind of stuff. So if you've got an annual membership or a magazine subscription or whatever that you're trying to manage, you do that all in CiviCRM, but then you're using the Drupal login as the place where that membership is applied to the content over there that your membership or role gives you rights to. So there are specific modules that match those up, and a whole bunch of others. There are only a few Drupal 8 specific modules ready yet because, the Drupal, once they get CiviCRM installing well in Drupal, then there will be more of a user community, so the rest of the work will get done to bring the rest of the modules in as necessary. The CiviCRM community is a little, it's been a much smaller group for the last several years, because as a slice of in the Drupal community, you've got hundreds of thousands of people around the world who are using and understanding Drupal. CiviCRM has about 12,000 active installs that have registered with the site. So the community up until now has been largely driven by the founders of the project and the development partners who've been active in helping organizations get into CiviCRM. But the last few years, through the use of social media and other tools like that have gotten the discussions out of this very developer-specific realm, they've been reaching out a lot more to the actual end users who are trying to interact now with the developers, and the developers are kind of going, whoa, nobody told me I had to interact with end users. So we're developing more of a community of middle people who will maintain the different resources that we've been bringing up to manage the project. And they're also, the original founder of the project decided basically that he wanted to have a life aside from dealing with CiviCRM. So he's handed over control of the project to a new core team, but they also, they want to develop the code. They don't want to deal with building the community and the project. So they're now going through this governance structure process where they'll be electing people to deal with the Civi camps and the documentation and all that other stuff that goes around the project, and also trying to bring in more end users to actually drive new priorities and stuff, instead of just being, previously it was very much a specific organization, say like the Green Party here in Canada did a lot of development work on CiviCRM in past years because they needed a get out the vote walk list. So they wrote the code and then contributed it back to the community as an extension, like this get out the vote extension that anybody could use. But then there are other projects that are just a little more of wider use in the community. So they just want to get more end user input into where the priorities of the core team should be going. So it should be interesting over the next year. And then to get a little more, they used to have a CiviCon once or twice a year, And it would be this big convention where all of the partner developers would get together and they'd sprint for a few days and actually do a lot more development on the project. And now they're trying to do more distributed Civi camps in local areas. So we've had them in the past year. I've been to one in Montreal and one in Calgary. And those brought in a lot more of the people actually using CiviCRM and talking about how it's used and sharing their own information and experiences. So it's just the community is growing in really friendly and interesting ways. So, and in terms of Canadian content, we have a very strong environment as part of the CiviCRM ecosphere in Canada. We have a couple of co-ops in Montreal that do a lot of work with it. We've got a group out in Calgary called Semper IT, Blackfly Consulting. There are about 10 different agencies in Canada that are doing a lot of work with CiviCRM and supporting it and managing it for clients. And they've also worked on specific Canadian extensions for CiviCRM, so that if you're a Canadian charity with no staff, you can, pretty quickly throw together. If you can build a Drupal site, you can add on CiviCRM and start generating Canadian tax receipts that are they're approved by the CRA as valid tax receipts. And there's also a payment gateway for nonprofits and charities by IATS. They're payment process, like the credit card processor, out in Vancouver. They're Canadian-based, and they only work with nonprofits and charities. So they're very, they have a really good understanding of the needs of that type of organization. And they also, instead of saying, please go out and write code to connect to our service, they actually paid for developers to develop and maintain the gateway to their service. So they've made it, it's in their own best interest to, say, hey, you can click 3 buttons and have a payment gateway working. But they've also committed to, getting the code written and tested and documented in the CiviCRM sphere. Okay, the other interesting thing that the Civi community does, and this has grown a lot in the last couple of years also, is that for extensions that are wanted by somebody, but because we're all nonprofits and charities, we can't afford to run it and hire a developer and spend $50,000 on one little thing. And some of them aren't that big. Like these 3 that I just grabbed this morning are 3 different development groups that have made a quote for what they think it will take to add Civi tutorial, a built-in prototype form builder, and I don't know what Select 2 is, but whatever that is. So they do these Make It Happen campaigns. So instead of one charity or nonprofit having to foot the bill for the entire development and maintenance of an extension, everybody can go, yeah, I'd like that. I can throw in $500, but I can't afford to develop it myself. And then when it hits so it's like their own built-in crowdfunding, but specific to a CiviCRM project, and it's all run through CiviCRM. So if it doesn't happen, they don't collect on the pledges, and nobody's out any money because it's just a CiviCRM server that's running it all. And actually, they don't just do it for writing code. It can be anything that needs to be paid for that's of value to the wider community. So last year there was a Make It Happen. There was one guy who was spending an insane amount of time updating all of the user documentation as a volunteer, and he just ran out of time and he needed to go get some more gigs, and it was almost done, and they're like, you know, what would it take for you to finish this? And he was like, I need about $2,500 to support me for a month while I finish the documentation. So we did make it happen, and he wrote a user guide. So, and it's in a new form, like they've created this new structure for all the documentation and stuff. The other thing they've done in the development community is there used to be an issue queue that was similar to the Drupal issue queue, but it was worse for the developers, and the developers hated it, and everybody else hated it because they couldn't understand where to find anything, and then they tried to move it to Jira, and that made it even worse. So they came up with 3 different solutions. So they've moved all the code to GitLab, and so there's labs.civicrm.org, and so that's where the code lives and where a lot of the developer project talk goes on in GitLab threads and stuff like that. They've installed a Mattermost instance, so that's like, it's kind of like a Slack chat, but it's an open source thing because we're all cheap, right? Or poor, or so we have this chat.civicrm.org where people start conversations or ask simple questions and get answers, and it's more like a real-time chatting, like in Slack. And then for actual issues and fixes and kind of the permanent record of how these things are done, we've gone to a Stack Exchange. So typically people will start, like they'll ask a question in the chat, people will get back to them and say, okay, let's formulate that into a question and take it over to Stack Exchange, and then it's answered there. And then everybody benefits, of course, from, you know, being able to find properly formatted questions and answers and solutions to their problems. So that's come a massive way. And they've actually, at the Civi camps, they've spent some time training all the end users on how to use these tools so that every question kind of goes to develop the knowledge base of the project. So I think it's pretty cool. And then on the CiviCRM.org site, there's a new documentation section, and so it's got a user guide, system admin guide, and developer guide for dealing with CiviCRM. The user guide and the system administrator guide are the new ones that the Make It Happen paid for, and the developer guide is being updated now. And then they've also used the same, because at the time when they were developing the documentation, they also developed documentation standards. So they've started applying those documentation standards to all of the extensions. So now you can get properly formatted, consistent documentation for all of the extensions as well. And that used to be kind of, you know, tucked away in README files and stuff like that. So, okay. Now on to the new look and feel stuff. The 2 huge things in CiviCRM in how it appeals to end users. There's very little functional change between the standard old theme and this new one called Shoreditch. But I can give you, okay, this is what CiviCRM looked like in the past. So it's perfectly functional and usable, and as long as you know exactly where you're going, you can find anything. So if you look at a user record, you'll see like 100 tabs that all have cryptic numbers next to them, and you can probably, well, we had in-field editing, so it wasn't that bad. This was only like a year or so that we got this beautiful new interface. So now with Shoreditch, it's also added, like it's mostly theming changes, but they've also really made the menus a lot more functional, and the quick search is easier. This used to be this really picky little drop-down arrow that you could never really hit properly to change what you're searching for, so everybody only searched by last name because it was just a pain to do anything else. So now we have this beautiful quick search, and we can go and see a record, and the record itself is much cleaner. It's easy to edit in line. If you're adding a new employer, because that's a relationship, it would have in the past taken you out to, like, you'd have to go out and create the employer record and then come back and attach yourself to it. And now it just pops up a new organization record right within the user record. So that's pretty cool. And it lets you search, like if you're in the back end, you obviously have, you know, if you don't have permissions, none of this stuff shows up. But if anything you're permissioned to do, you can do a lot more easily in the back end. And it doesn't look like a back end. It's like, it's just nice data entry forms, and it's easy to use. And then all of those buttons up at the top are now it's overall just a nicer user experience. It's better laid out. It's easier to find information. And it's also entirely responsive. It used to just kind of squish down and go ugly, and now that's what it's doing here. I haven't hit the break point yet, I guess. Anyway, but it works. There's another chunk called CiviCase that I'm not really going to get into because I don't use it myself. But that's, you can use case management for anything that you would have a whole bunch of steps to, like any kind of workflow where you've got to go through a lot of steps. You can set up those things in the module called CiviCase, and the Shoreditch project has also put an all new screen overlays on that to make it easier for end users who are having to log in and fill out a lot of repetitive forms. So if you've got people, I don't know, like social workers or whatever, in an environment where they're filling out a lot of online forms, it gives them just a really pretty little form that's then put into whatever workflow it needs to be in. And they don't have to see any of the ugly back-end stuff. And there's also a new module for managing volunteers. So again, if you're doing any kind of thing where you're doing volunteer management, you just define the project, you tell it what type of volunteers you want. I'm not sure that, no, I haven't set it up in here. Okay. But if anybody wants to look at that, contact me later and I can show you a couple of those that I've done. This summer I was helping with a yoga camp, and we had tons of volunteers going, like doing specific tasks, and they had to put in so many hours to get their free t-shirt and stuff. So it was able to, you know, pump out a nice schedule for everybody, and then at the end of the time show who actually checked in and done their stuff, and it's really quite slick, and took like I spent maybe 10 minutes in a meeting with the volunteer coordinator, and then she just kind of went, oh, okay, I see how this works. I'll call you if I have any problems. And she did not call me, and all the volunteers showed up and did their thing. So it's just it's a nice addition to the project. One of the Make It Happens that's going on now is actually for training people how to use it. There's a Civi tutorial. So they're using some JavaScript project to make, like you'd have another menu item, or under each menu item, you'll have a button that says, show me how. And then it'll step you through with pop-ups showing you and going through all the screens and doing the different functions. So that's something happening over the next couple of months. So that's Shoreditch. The other bigger piece actually is called Mosaico, and it's a drag and drop responsive email templater. Because previously in CiviCRM, you could, if you knew how, create responsive email templates by writing code and then hoping your end users who actually want to send out all the emails don't put images and text in the wrong place and mess up all the code and have blah showing up in people's mailboxes, which is why we found a lot of people said they were moving away, like they weren't using CiviCRM for their mailing because it was too much of a hassle. So they just went over to MailChimp and did it, and then had no mailing results in their CiviCRM. Like, so, because it's not, MailChimp and other proprietary mailing providers do not make it easy to export the value of your data, right? So, and CiviCRM already had a very robust email reporting structure and bulk email connectors for SMTP services and all of that kind of stuff. But because of the ugliness of the template builder, very few organizations were using it unless they had staff who could craft the email templates properly. So one of last year's Make It Happens was the mail templates. So now you just go to this message template builder and you pick a base template and then you drag and drop blocks into where you want it, and then you go, oh, I don't need Google+. So you'll just turn off Google+ and say, I would rather have Instagram. And then you've defined also in your settings, you know, what your Facebook and Twitter and Instagram are. So people, like your end users, just have to go into, I want to do a mailing, I want to send it to these people, I want to use that template, and all they're worried about is what picture is going in there. My users love this, having the image sizes in the template so they don't have to call me every time they do an email and ask what size that image should be. This has really revolutionized the use of the whole CiviCRM email piece, which in and of it, like all the technical stuff, has not changed at all. The only thing we've added is the template builder, and it's totally changed the usage of that part of CiviCRM. And it's made the emails prettier, because it was like people would just give up and default to just sticking a banner image in and then typing their text and sending the email, because that's, what was easy and more bulletproof. This also includes all of the, like you can define in your CiviCRM settings what required elements are. So for like CASL compliance or GDPR or any of those kind of compliance issues, you have tokens in the email that give the domain address or the reply address or unsubscribe and opt-out links and then all the social media stuff. And it always starts at the top with a view in your browser button. And it also has, like if you want to just take this out and use the template in Outlook, you can I don't know why I said that. Why would you do that? If you want to take this template somewhere else to use it or transfer it, I have this beautiful template that I've made, but somebody else in a related organization wants to use a similar thing. I can download my template, send it over to them. it's just plain HTML. And then they can import it. And if you've ever tried to export and import again from MailChimp or Constant Contact or any of the commercial services, like they always do, if you have a high enough paid account, you can export, but the code is just really, like it's not worth the trouble to modify it for another system. So, and then this is just the HTML open in a browser, totally divorced from CiviCRM, so you can see how it works responsively and test it out external as it's going to be delivered to your end users. Whereas before you'd have to, well, you can still send, and it's still best practice to send tests, but you can actually see it now. So when you're done, then you just pop over to mailings and say you want to do a new mailing, and then you pick the template and you pick your people and add it to a campaign and tag it and stuff like that, so that later on, when you want to see the results of a campaign, you have everything from that campaign tagged together. So, and then you have groups and tags and all of that kind of stuff. Okay, but that's not look and feel. So, so I mentioned CiviCase. Sadly, I cannot demonstrate CiviCase. And CiviVolunteer is also, it's new, and it's been done with the new look and feel. So you don't have to kind of upgrade anything there to get all the cool new stuff. Okay. Why don't I have a next slide? Okay. Apparently, somehow, I deleted all the rest of my slides. Okay. That's the bulk of what I wanted to talk about. Does anybody want to see anything specific in the old parts of CiviCRM, or did I bring up questions that I just glossed over because I've talked about them 100 times before? Yeah.
Just curious about its reporting function.
Yeah. So for the mail reporting, I actually have, like this one is my own organization. So if we look at scheduled and sent mailings, we've got, like you get the basic delivery summary of who you sent a mail to, successful and unique opens, the click-throughs, and you can actually click through to the click-throughs to see who opened what, and then also what your most popular opening things were. So every time you put a link in an outgoing message, CiviCRM converts it to a tokenized link that it goes to wherever it's going to go to, but it passes through CiviCRM, so it leaves a trace here. Yeah, so you can see exactly who is doing what with all of your messages. And then it's got intelligent bounce handling, so it will tell you if a bounce is permanent or temporary. Like it can read the bounce codes, and if a bounce is permanent, then it'll block that user's address. So see exceeded max time, no, it will retry those ones. But if we had a bounce that came back saying mailbox no longer existed, then it would tag that mailbox to not be used anymore, so that you're not increasing your spam levels, because it's while CiviCRM just handles the email. They recommend that you not just use a server-based mail, like it will work with just a mail to link going straight up from your web server. But with that, most of your messages are not going to make it to people's mailboxes because it's an untrusted source and all of that. So you're going to use some kind of SMTP service. But with those, if you're not handling your bounces properly, then they're going to shut you down because you're resending to bad mailboxes and stuff like that, which doesn't help their reputation. So I use generally a service called SparkPost as my SMTP service because they have a very generous free level of SMTP for nonprofits and charities. Well, for anybody, but you can do something like 50,000 messages a month for free. And then even their next level, like the paid levels, are not onerous. So compared to paying, again, for MailChimp, like I think we were spending about $100 a month on MailChimp, and now we're spending $9 for SparkPost because all they're handling is that SMTP forwarding and bounce processing. But you get the benefit of them being a trusted mailer. So you get slightly better deliverability because you're going through a trust, like an SMTP service that is keeping their servers clean. So, and again, there's, like if that's scary for anybody, there's an extension for that. So you just click, I want to use SparkPost. You get a SparkPost, you set up an account, you get an API key, you plug that into CiviCRM, and then you've got an encrypted channel between your server and SparkPost, and all of your stuff is just nice and secure and works well. And it's fast, and you're not bogging down. Yeah, it's magic. And you can also, if you can set, it's a little tricky, but for the unsubscribe and opt-outs, you can either have it just be an instant unsubscribe that comes, code that comes back, or you can set up an unsubscribe/opt-out page that says, oh, are you really sure? We're going to miss you a lot, blah, 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 So you can guilt them into staying with you a bit in your configuration of your unsubscribe and opt-out links. And any of those obviously are, like what's displayed to the user is just text with the token in the background. Oh, the other thing, in the emails, there are hundreds of tokens that you can use that suck data from your contact records. So, like one thing we've found over the last year or so, and I find myself ridiculously tricked by this all the time, even though, because I get an email that says, hey, Catherine, did you see our new thingy, what's it? And I'm like, oh, they're sending it to me. But it's a token that says, hey, first name, blah, blah, blah. So you can use all of those tokens in, any place in your email that is going to be built out of, because it's just text and fields, right? So, yeah.
Is there a member portal or an area of the website for members?
There can be, not on this particular one, but I've done several that's the main use of CiviCRM. So you'll have a CiviCRM membership, and that again is why you should be using CiviCRM with Drupal if that's your goal, because then you're using Drupal's role-based access, right? You're not, like, it has nothing to do with CiviCRM. CiviCRM is just saying, Catherine is a member. And then Drupal is saying, oh, that Catherine is this Catherine, and she gets rights to that content. But yeah, with one of my biggest ones in the last few years, Women in Communications and Technology, they have they migrated actually from Joomla to Drupal 2 years ago, just to be able to better manage their membership content and to get the CiviCRM web forms. Because you can do really wonderful things with web forms. Like we just, also for them, they do this awards project every year, so people can nominate other people to win awards. So all of the people information is in CiviCRM. So if I'm coming in to nominate Tiff for an award, I would just fill out the form and say, I'm logged in, so it goes, okay, I'm the nominator, so it sucks in my information, so I don't have to type all of that out. And then as I start typing Tiffany's information, it'll say, oh, we have a record for her too, or we don't. Don't you think maybe she should be a member before we nominate her for an award? You know? So you'll have a field to fill out, and that gives us more information. Then it tags both records in CiviCRM as a nominee, a nominator, 2018, interested in awards, you know, so we can, we just gather up all of that information by having people fill out those forms. And then on the Drupal side, it's keeping track of all the uploaded letters of recommendation and resume and all of that kind of stuff. And you've got all the power of Drupal web forms doing that, and the privacy and security of Drupal on that side, and then the CiviCRM to do all the tagging and tracking and relationships. Yes?
So would you build the donation page or something like that in CiviCRM, or in Drupal with that?
Could be either. I would do it in, like, it's really built into, like here you go, new, they call it contributions, because it could be a donation, it could be an event. The events are awesome. But it could be an event fee or a membership fee or a donation or a purchase. So they're all called contributions, and it's basically filling out a form, picking the financial type. And so for this one, what did you say you want it to be? A donation. And actually for donations, there's an extension called Simple Donate, and you just plug that in and it gives you other, like it just builds out some really nice donation stuff. And the nice piece about, or the better piece about using Shoreditch is it also wraps all of the CiviCRM things in classes better than the old system did. So when you're exposing all of that stuff in your Drupal pages, it's much easier to integrate into a Drupal theme. Whereas before you'd have this beautiful Drupal page and then this blob of CiviCRM looking stuff in the middle, you know, around your, or donation or event, ticket buying or whatever.
And you would expose it via a Drupal blog or something?
You could, or you can just say, make this page public, and then, like, is this an online contribution page? And you say yes, and then it just gives you a link. So all you have to do is have your Drupal stuff, like you can also throw it in a block or whatever, like however you want to pass that through to Drupal. It could be just embedded in the Drupal, or you can do it as a Drupal page that just sends the information back to Civi, like whichever way you want to do it.
HTML that you insert in the
Exactly,
Oh.
yeah. Yep.
Mentioning sort of bulk emailing, let's call it, and you mentioned sort of membership idea. Can you actually set up the, management, so to speak, or whatever, can contact members directly at an
Yes.
individual basis?
Yeah, you just go to an individual, and so again, I'll just go to myself, and then I click on my email, and then the from addresses are like you define who's allowed to send email from CiviCRM directly, but otherwise it's just an email, yeah. So, and it's got like the same elegant WYSIWYG you have in Drupal. So, yeah, CK Editor. You can use your templates again here if you want to. Like we often, we just did an event that we were only inviting kind of small groups of people with different email messages instead, because it was an event for like 50 people. So, and we wanted to make sure that the right people were showing up with each other. So we did an invitation template in the template builder. So it had all the pretty pictures and everything. It was formatted beautifully. But then we sent it out to small groups using, because you can either go to an individual or to any group that you can search for. So if I go to find contacts, and then I want to, well, attendees is going to be too big. You can address up to 50 records in a direct email message, but anything over that is bulk mail. Like, so you have to go to the bulk mail system to do more than 50. But yeah, if you want to do individuals or small groups.
Well, once you're involved, you can do a search against whatever criteria to get a list.
Yeah, well, basically you would do your search first, and then you create a thing called a smart group, because there are groups, then smart groups, which are basically saved searches. So you do your search in the main database, like you just go in and find all the tags and groups and people only in Ontario. Like under advanced search, there's advanced search and then full text search, which is obviously even more. But you can search on any data point that you have in here. So if you need to find all the people who know how to use a camera, who live in Ontario and are coming to an event, like you just pick all those data points and then hit search, and this is going to come up with nothing because I haven't filled in any of that data. But like if you had those data points in there, then you could you can search on anything and then use that search result, and one of the actions is create a smart group or add people to a smart group if you've already got a smart group and you just want to add another chunk of people to it. And then that's just a saved search that you can define as a mailing, like that it has access to bulk mail. And then you can select that as your target for the mail. So you can't search in the mail, but like you have to do your search first. Yeah. Well, you can save a draft. Like you can go and do everything else, because all of your mailings too are saved at every step of the way. So if you start drafting up something and then have to go away and do 500 other things, or if you're reusing a mail, because the other thing people use a lot, there's a thing called CiviRules. That's another extension that lets you define like rules on a trigger. So again, for memberships, you could say this on a new sign up, they get this message, then a week later they get this message, then a month later they get that message, and then a month before their membership's going to expire, they get a, hey, come back and renew. And then there's, like, that's in the membership section, there's all of those different statuses for membership too. And you can create your own, like anything that's not in here, you can create in here. So often I'll have, like again for WCT, they have chapters across the country. So we have the national website, but then chapters across the country do events. So each chapter person can come in and create their own events and mail them out to their own group. But they don't, like the Ottawa chapter can't bulk mail to the whole country. They can only bulk mail to people who've signed up for their group. And so you can have that really tight hierarchy of permissions within CiviCRM itself. And then once you go over to Drupal, like if we just pop over, if you're familiar with Drupal permissions, If we just look at the CiviCRM ones, they start here, I think they go on for 11 pages if you print it out. And that's how granular you can get. Generally, I figure I have like 3 different roles. I have an administrator who can do everything, and then if there's a regional or chapter role, they'll have a different set of permissions. And then regular users who are logged in, like then you've got anonymous and authenticated. A set of things, like, so anonymous people can sign up and pay for events, but only members. Oh, there's another piece that it's an extension, but for a membership organization, because people seem to like that. There's a piece called CiviDiscount where you can either give out discount codes for people for a percentage off of an event or a membership or whatever, or you can say there's an automatic discount for anybody logged in with a member role. So you can say my platinum members get free events, my regular members get a 50% off, and regular people get the full price. So it's a cool extension. I use it on like every site.
Is SparkPost do credit card vaulting?
Sorry?
SparkPost.
SparkPost.
Like for automatically goes on in bank card information?
I don't think so. I only use,
Apparatus that goes on around that.
yeah, I only use them for actual SMTP forwarding. I don't even look at their stats.
Oh, do I not?
Yeah.
The people that.
Oh, IATS.
Yes.
Yes,
sorry.
IATS does everything.
Oh, okay.
And they do it well. And they also have an awesome deal for if you're taking money, if you want to let people pay from their bank account, any Canadian bank, and there's no percentage fee on bank transfers. It's like 30 cents a transaction. So like if you're selling memberships in Canada and people want to use online banking instead of credit card, then as an organization, you're only paying 30 cents transaction fee instead of 3%. So I highly recommend them. And their people are awesome. And yeah, I can't say enough good things about IATS. Okay. And there's coffee and muffins again at 3 o'clock. So if you need sustenance before the next session. Yep.
I don't know if you covered this, but is there a cost? Like,
No, it's an open source project. So the cost is like Drupal. It costs as much as you need to host it and configure it. Like if you need to pay somebody to configure it. Quite frankly, most of the people working in CiviCRM are also kind of non-profity people, so they do not charge exorbitant fees for maintaining and managing. And there are a couple of turnkey Canadian hosts who do everything. Like you just send them a small amount of money every month, and they take care of your Drupal and CiviCRM and all your security patches, and you just manage your content.
can you use it if you're not a charity?
Oh, yeah. It's an open source project, so anybody can use it. It tends to be, like it's been developed with the needs of charities and nonprofits, but there's no entry bar. Like nobody's checking to see who you are. Yeah. If you're like Nazis or something, they probably would ask you not to sign up as you know. Yeah. Well, they just say, just don't tell anybody. You know, because they can't, it's an open source project, so anybody can use it.
And in the long run, everybody benefits if that.
Exactly. That's why I come to things like this and do this, because the more people I can convince to use CiviCRM, the more community support there is for it, the more the partnerships are making in supporting you all. So, you know, it keeps the whole ecosystem healthier. Yeah.
And it's a Drupal distribution as well.
No, it's a Drupal add-on. So you can find it by going to Drupal modules. It has its own install thing, But if you just install it like a regular Drupal module, it'll just come up with a notice saying, oh, you can't do that, you need to run this install script. And it gives you the button to click on to run the install script, so you really don't, like,
Person proof.
yeah, it's really, really simple. There are several demo sites also. If you go to civicrm.org and click on demo, there are a lot of places now doing demo sites. So you can spin up, like either, actually the old style one I showed you is a demo. Some of them are new ones, some of them are in different languages. It's whatever that provider decided they wanted to demonstrate. So they maybe have, different things that they're providing, but yes.
So have you ever had to use, for a client, just the sort of CiviCRM application through, just, like a sort of like a summary?
Yeah, that's what actually this Action Canada one, all that site does is our CiviCRM stuff. There's no site there. Like, there's a couple of web forms that we use to feed into CiviCRM, and there's a thing saying, if you're coming here to see Action Canada, go there, because this site is just for CiviCRM. Yeah.
But you used it for Drupal.
So it's a Drupal 7 installation, just because I needed to get it, like I needed CiviCRM to manage an event that was like in a week. So I did it Drupal 7 because I can do Drupal 7 in minutes. So,
How long
yeah.
would you say it took you to kind of figure it out, like when you first came across CiviCRM and started playing with it?
Not really long, because I was on a quest to find something. So I had been looking, like I'd been doing comparisons between a bunch of different timed demos with, like Razor's Edge and stuff like that, and none of them, and MailChimp, and everything else was kind of restricted, and you can try it for 5 minutes, but remember, I just found it really awkward, and then I came across CiviCRM, and I've been using it ever since. So almost as long as I've been doing Drupal. Yeah.
Just to get a little bit more clear about Drupal 7 versus Drupal 8. You made reference to that.
My next site that I'm working on is Drupal 8 with CiviCRM. There are a couple, like if you just Google installing CiviCRM on Drupal 8, there are a couple of articles written by really bright people who've done that. There's a group called My Drop Wizard in the States they specialize in Drupal support. They've also had a project the last couple of years to do extended support of Drupal 6 for people who aren't ready, like their Drupal 6 is still working, but they just have security concerns. So My Drop Wizard is actually doing extended support on Drupal 6, and they just fell in love with CiviCRM a couple of years ago, and kind of had to dive into it because a client was insisting that they use CiviCRM for their bulk mail and stuff, and they just fell in love with it. So they've been a huge supporter, and they started up, they did a beta project last year where they offered free migration to 10 nonprofits to go Drupal 8 and CiviCRM. And so now they've got this fully, like a hosted software as a service, basically, where they're doing Drupal 8 and CiviCRM. So if you're not a control freak, or if you don't want to be dealing with that, you can just hand it over to them. Yes, time. Yeah, sorry. Oh, is it next session? So, okay.